Have you ever understood one of your patterns so clearly that you could explain where it began, recognize every trigger, and still find yourself repeating it? You may know why you procrastinate, why money makes you tense, why confidence disappears under pressure, or why a project remains unfinished even though you think about it every day. The pattern is no longer unconscious, yet awareness alone has not set you free. In this video, we are going to explore why self-awareness can sometimes become a form of surveillance, how repeated checking can keep the nervous system organized around the very state you want to leave, and how to recognize the brief choice point where observation can finally become action. We will look at a real effect from physics, a useful model of agency from neuroscience, and a simple three-part practice you can apply to work, money, health, confidence, habits, and creative projects. Self-awareness is usually presented as the doorway to change. You notice the behavior, name the emotion, trace it back to its origin, and assume that transformation should naturally follow. Sometimes it does, because understanding can remove confusion and reveal choices that were previously hidden. But awareness has another form that feels intelligent, responsible, and emotionally sophisticated while producing almost no movement. It begins when reflection becomes repetitive monitoring, when preparation becomes postponement, and when the desire to understand replaces the willingness to create a new event. This is how someone can read 5 books about discipline and still avoid the first hour of difficult work. They can analyze their fear of visibility and still keep the finished article, application, proposal, or video hidden in a folder. They can understand their financial habits in detail, yet continue checking the same balance without making the decision that would change what happens next. The missing ingredient is rarely another explanation. More often, it is a change in the position from which the next choice is made. There are 2 broad positions from which a person can relate to their own life. The first is the observer. The observer studies what is happening, compares the present with the past, predicts possible outcomes, and looks for meaning in every signal. The problem begins when observation becomes the permanent way you relate to yourself. Then your life starts to feel like a case file, and every difficult day becomes evidence about who you are and what the future will hold. A delayed reply becomes a verdict. One unproductive morning becomes proof that you lack discipline, and one disappointing result becomes a prediction of everything that follows. You may become highly accurate at describing your experience while becoming less able to interrupt it. The second position is the creator. The word can sound mystical, but its meaning here is practical. The creator is the position from which you produce a deliberate event through a decision, a request, a boundary, a completed action, or a sustained course of behavior. It is the moment when you stop asking only what reality is showing you and begin asking what your next action will add to reality. The observer asks, what is happening and what does it mean? The creator asks, what am I generating through the choice I make now? Both questions can be intelligent, but they organize attention in different directions. The first searches for an explanation of the current state, while the second looks for the next available point of influence. Psychology offers a related idea through Julian Rotter's work on locus of control. Rotter examined whether people tend to experience outcomes as connected to their own behavior or governed mainly by luck, circumstance, powerful others, and forces beyond personal control. Nobody controls every outcome, and taking responsibility for everything can become as distorted as taking responsibility for nothing. The useful question is not whether you control the whole situation. The useful question is whether you can identify and use the part that genuinely belongs to you. Imagine someone who believes they deserve a promotion. In observer mode, they monitor their manager's tone, compare themselves with colleagues, reread previous feedback, and interpret every meeting invitation as a possible sign. They may spend months collecting evidence that they are undervalued without creating a single moment that requires the organization to respond. In creator mode, the same person prepares a clear case, requests a meeting, names the role or salary they are seeking, and asks what measurable conditions must be met for progression. The answer may still be no, but the person has moved from interpreting the system to influencing it directly. Creator mode is not the fantasy that you command every outcome. It is the discipline of refusing to surrender the part that still belongs to you. Physicists discovered something that offers a powerful image for this problem. Under specific experimental conditions, repeated measurements can inhibit a quantum system from transitioning from one state to another. This is known as the quantum Zeno effect. A system that would normally evolve can remain near its initial state when it is measured frequently enough. In 1977, physicists B. Misra and E.C.G. Sudarshan described how sufficiently frequent observation could inhibit the evolution of an unstable quantum system. In 1990, Wayne Itano and his colleagues reported an experiment involving laser-cooled beryllium ions, showing that repeated measurement inhibited transitions between two energy states under the conditions they created. The effect belongs to a precise physical domain, and its interpretation has been examined and debated within physics. It doesn't prove that a career, bank account, habit, or human body behaves like a quantum particle. Using quantum mechanics as literal proof of personal transformation would be misleading. What the effect offers is a structural comparison. Observation is not always neutral, and repeated intervention can sometimes affect whether a transition is allowed to unfold. In daily life, the mechanism is different. Repeated checking can reactivate uncertainty, return attention to the same unresolved state, and replace purposeful behavior with another round of interpretation. Think about the last time you were waiting for an important answer after submitting work, applying for a role, sending a proposal, or asking for an opportunity. You may have checked your email, reopened the message, examined the wording, and searched for meaning in every hour of silence. Each check promised relief, yet each one returned your nervous system to the identity of the person who was still waiting. The situation had not moved, but your mind had practiced monitoring it again. This pattern appears whenever a transition is inspected before it has had enough time to become stable. Someone exercises for 3 days and checks the mirror after every session. Someone begins saving and opens the banking app several times a day. Someone launches a creative project and studies the views before the work has reached enough people to reveal anything meaningful. In every case, participation is interrupted by the demand for immediate evidence. The alternative is not blindness. It is a better rhythm between observation and action. You observe long enough to choose a direction, then act long enough for that direction to produce information worth evaluating. You stop using measurement as emotional reassurance and begin using it as scheduled feedback. A weekly review can guide a project, while an hourly review can prevent you from doing the project at all. Before we go further into the science, it helps to name the practical method, because this is the part you can begin using today. The shift from observer to creator happens in 3 movements. First, notice the flare. This is the brief tightening, pull, or internal jolt that appears before you check the phone, reopen the account, search the symptom, abandon the task, or ask for reassurance. Don't turn it into a long story, and don't judge yourself for feeling it. Simply recognize that the urge to measure has arrived. Second, change the question. Instead of asking only, "What is happening and what does it mean?" ask, "What can I generate from here?" This doesn't forbid reflection. It prevents reflection from occupying the moment in which a useful action is available. Third, complete one observable act. Send the message instead of rereading the draft, make the call instead of researching how to make it, or open the document and write one paragraph instead of redesigning the plan. The action doesn't need to be dramatic. It only needs to be real, specific, and connected to the life you are trying to build. Notice the flare, change the question, and complete one observable act. Everything that follows will help explain why this simple sequence can feel so different from another round of analysis. Physics gives us the image of a transition interrupted by repeated measurement. But neuroscience offers another part of the puzzle: the experience of authorship. The brain needs to distinguish between an event you caused and an event that simply happened around you. When the nervous system sends a motor command, it also produces an internal prediction of the sensory consequences of that command. This predictive signal is often discussed through the idea of an efference copy and the reafference principle developed by Erich von Holst and Horst Mittelstadt. In simple terms, the brain prepares for what a self-generated action should feel like before the sensory result fully arrives. Lift a cup that you believe is full, only to discover that it is empty, and your arm rises too quickly because the predicted weight and the real weight don't match. A related principle helps explain why it is difficult to tickle yourself, because your nervous system predicts the sensory effects of your own movement. Your brain is constantly comparing intention, action, prediction, and outcome. This becomes especially interesting when we consider the sense of agency, the felt experience that says, "I caused this." In 2002, Patrick Haggard, Sam Clark, and Jerry Kalogeras published research on what became known as intentional binding. When participants voluntarily performed an action that produced a tone, they tended to perceive the action and its consequence as closer together in time than they really were. When similar movement was experienced as involuntary, that binding was reduced. Researchers continue to debate exactly what intentional binding measures, so it should not be treated as proof of free will or a complete theory of personal agency. It is better understood as one experimental marker related to the experience of causing an event. Even with that caution, the distinction is useful. Actions experienced as self-generated are processed differently from events we merely register after they occur. This gives us a grounded model for the creator position. Creation requires a real command expressed through behavior. It requires sending the application, publishing the work, setting the transfer, attending the appointment, beginning the training, making the request, or completing the difficult first step. A private decision can prepare action, but it cannot replace action indefinitely. A sense of authorship grows through repeated experiences of self-initiated action. This is why inner work becomes useful when it changes what you practice, tolerate, request, complete, or refuse. When thought never crosses into behavior, it can become another elegant form of observation. Money and work are often the first places where this difference becomes visible. A person may earn more than they earned 5 years ago and still feel trapped by the same financial anxiety. The balance is checked in the morning, checked after a purchase, checked before sleep, and checked whenever uncertainty needs a number to attach itself to. Each glance feels responsible because it provides information. But when the information produces no decision, the habit mainly trains vigilance. The number on the screen reports the result of earlier income, obligations, timing, and choices. Opening the app again rarely changes any of those forces. It simply asks the nervous system to re-enter the same unresolved relationship with the number. A creator-oriented financial action is different because it gives the system a new input. A fixed amount is transferred automatically on payday, a neglected invoice is sent, a subscription is cancelled, a repayment plan is arranged, or a conversation about compensation is scheduled. These actions may be small, but each one creates an event that didn't exist before. Consider 2 skilled professionals who both believe they are underpaid. The first repeatedly checks salary reports, compares job titles, discusses the injustice with trusted people, and waits for management to recognize unspoken effort. The second gathers the same information once, chooses a number, documents their contribution, and asks for a formal review. Both may feel nervous, and neither controls the final answer. Only one has created a moment that requires a response. The difference is not optimism, because the second person may feel less confident and expect more resistance. They act because the action is the only available path to clarity. This is why confidence is often misunderstood. People wait to feel certain before acting, even though confidence is frequently built by acting, meeting the result, and discovering that they can remain present. A useful financial or professional review should direct behavior rather than repeatedly measure emotional safety. Choose when you will review the numbers, decide which actions follow from defined conditions, and then return your attention to earning, creating, negotiating, serving, or building. Financial hardship, low wages, unstable work, debt, caring responsibilities, and systemic barriers are real. Creator mode is not blame disguised as empowerment. It begins by acknowledging reality accurately and then identifying the smallest available action that changes the direction of the system. The room for movement may be large or painfully small, but observation should not consume the energy required to use the room that exists. The client who has not been invoiced cannot pay an invoice that was never sent. The manager cannot respond clearly to a request that was never made. The savings plan cannot become a habit while it remains an intention reconsidered from the beginning every month. The same pattern appears in communication at work. A meeting is replayed, sentence by sentence. A colleague's tone becomes evidence, and a short message from a manager is interpreted through every previous disappointment. The person may produce an accurate account of the dynamic while never saying the one sentence that could clarify it. Imagine someone who repeatedly feels overlooked in team discussions. They notice who receives credit, who is invited to speak, and who is chosen to lead the next project. They analyze the pattern afterwards and promise themselves that next time they will be more assertive. Then the next meeting arrives, hesitation appears, and they wait for someone else to create an opening. The missing step is not a more sophisticated diagnosis. It is a generated act such as speaking early, requesting ownership, documenting the contribution, or naming the pattern directly in a private conversation. Hints feel safer because they preserve deniability, but the same protection also prevents clarity. A direct sentence might be, "I would like to lead the next campaign, and here is the result I believe I can deliver." It might be, "I need clearer priorities before I can complete this well," or "I would like my contribution credited in the final presentation." These statements don't guarantee cooperation, but they produce information that weeks of interpretation cannot provide. Some environments genuinely are the problem. No internal shift can turn an exploitative workplace into a healthy one or force a gatekeeper to recognize value. Direct action may reveal that the situation cannot be repaired, but that clarity can lead to a boundary, a formal complaint, a new role, a different client, or an exit that endless monitoring kept postponing. Authorship matters even when the answer is disappointing, because it gives you something real enough to build from. The body is where this distinction requires the greatest care. Nothing in this video is medical advice, and nothing here suggests ignoring symptoms, avoiding diagnosis, stopping prescribed treatment, or replacing qualified care with a psychological idea. Seeking appropriate medical support is itself a creator action because it is a deliberate step directed toward a real outcome. The pattern begins when responsible attention becomes compulsive monitoring that no longer produces useful action. A person notices a sensation, checks it, compares it with yesterday, searches for an explanation, reads several possible causes, and scans again to see whether anything has changed. The next day, the process repeats with more information but no clearer plan. This can happen alongside real symptoms and real medical needs. The fact that attention and stress can influence the experience of discomfort doesn't mean the discomfort is imaginary. Imagine someone living with recurring fatigue, digestive symptoms, headaches, pain, or another condition that has not produced a simple answer. Every meal becomes a possible cause, every low-energy afternoon becomes evidence, and every variation is entered into an internal record that never closes. The person may be doing this because they are conscientious and want to recover, yet vigilance can gradually become the entire relationship with the body. The observer asks one sensation to answer questions it cannot answer. Is the treatment failing? What will happen next month? And will I always feel this way? A single afternoon is made responsible for predicting an entire future. The creator position approaches the body differently. It gathers the information required for responsible care, agrees a sensible plan with an appropriate professional, defines when progress will be reviewed, and gives the plan enough consistency to reveal something meaningful. The person may track symptoms at a scheduled time rather than scanning continuously. They remain attentive without making vigilance their full-time occupation. This doesn't guarantee a particular health outcome because bodies are complex and decisiveness cannot control biology. What changes is the structure within which uncertainty is carried. Taking medication as directed, attending an appointment, resting when needed, preparing supportive food, completing rehabilitation exercises, and asking a clinician a clear question are generated acts. Searching the same symptom late at night for the fourth time that week may feel active, but it often produces no new course of action. The line is not optimism versus realism. The line is useful care versus repetitive registration. Attention, stress, sleep, pain, digestion, and emotional state can influence one another, although the details differ for every condition and every person. A real symptom can be intensified by fear without being caused by fear, and a medical condition can require treatment while continuous checking creates an additional layer of distress. Creator mode doesn't demand cheerful thoughts about a body that is struggling. It asks you to distinguish caring for the body from building an entire life around monitoring it. Habits and creative projects reveal the same mechanism in a different form. A person decides to exercise, study, write, meditate, build a business, learn a skill, or publish their work. They begin with sincere intention, but soon their attention shifts from doing the habit to evaluating what the habit says about them. One missed day becomes evidence that they lack discipline. One difficult session becomes evidence that the method is wrong, and 1 week without visible results becomes evidence that the project has no future. This is observer mode turning performance into identity. The person no longer asks whether the system is improving over time. They ask whether every individual day proves that they are becoming the person they hoped to become. No habit can carry that level of symbolic pressure for long. James Clear's Atomic Habits helped popularize the idea that lasting change is built through systems and repeated votes for an identity rather than one dramatic act. The deeper point is that a vote only counts when it becomes behavior. Reading about consistency is not a vote for consistency, and designing the perfect routine is not a vote for consistency. Completing today's small action is the vote. Creator mode makes the behavior small enough to execute and stable enough to repeat. It decides in advance what happens on low-energy days, what counts as the minimum, and when the system will be reviewed. This removes the need to hold a fresh debate every morning. The decision has already been made, so the day only requires participation. Imagine someone who wants to write a book, launch a channel, build a portfolio, or create a new service. In observer mode, they compare tools, watch tutorials, study successful people, revise the plan, inspect the competition, and wait for the idea to feel ready. The research may be useful at first, but eventually it becomes an environment in which the project can remain perfect because it has not entered reality. Reality introduces limits, criticism, imperfect execution, and results that cannot be controlled. Observation protects the fantasy from those conditions. Creator mode accepts the cost of contact. The first chapter is written before the whole book is understood. The first video is published before the presenter feels natural, and the first offer is made before the business has perfect branding. This is not carelessness. It is respect for the fact that some information can only be obtained through participation. You cannot think your way into knowing how an audience will respond. You cannot plan your way into the physical confidence produced by 50 completed sessions. You cannot analyze your way into the competence created by repeated contact with real problems. The observer seeks certainty before beginning. The creator understands that action is one of the instruments through which reality becomes knowable. This is why disciplined people are not always people with stronger feelings. They are often people who have reduced the number of moments in which feelings are allowed to reopen the decision. They don't renegotiate the project whenever motivation changes, and they allow measurement to happen at a useful interval while the daily work remains protected. Readiness is often treated as a hidden feeling that must be discovered through more introspection. In many cases, readiness is simply the point at which preparation has become sufficient and action has become the next teacher. The most important moment in this entire idea is smaller than most people expect. It appears before the visible behavior begins as a brief internal flare. There may be a pull toward the phone, an urge to reopen the banking app, a desire to check the analytics, a need to search the symptom, or an impulse to abandon the difficult task for something easier. The sensation may last only a second, yet it contains the fork in the road. Observer mode treats the flare as an instruction to check, verify, interpret, and gather more evidence before continuing. Creator mode treats the same flare as a choice point. The feeling is acknowledged, but it is not automatically obeyed. For one brief moment, two paths remain available. You can measure the current state again, or you can generate the next useful action. Imagine an ordinary afternoon in which a proposal has gone unanswered longer than expected. The flare arrives and the hand moves toward the phone. In the old sequence, the inbox opens, the sent message is reread, the wording is examined, and a fresh interpretation is built from the same absence of information. 10 minutes later, nothing has changed except the nervous system's level of activation. In the new sequence, the flare is noticed before the phone is unlocked. The question changes from, "What does this silence mean?" to, "What am I generating through the choice I make now?" The answer may be to continue the current task and review the inbox at the scheduled time. It may be to send a concise follow-up because the agreed response window has passed. It may be to contact another prospect, submit another application, or create another opportunity, instead of allowing one person's silence to organize the entire day. The generated action can be small. It may be 10 focused minutes of work, one clear sentence, a small transfer, a prepared meal, a closed tab, or a return to the task that matters. A creator action is defined by authorship, not scale. Remember the 3 movements. Notice the flare without turning it into a story. Change the question from interpretation to generation. Complete one observable act that moves the situation in a useful direction. You will not catch every moment, and trying to monitor every impulse would create another version of the same problem. The goal is not perfect self-control. The goal is to recognize the fork often enough that a different response becomes familiar. At first, the phone will still be checked, the project will still be evaluated too early, and the plan will still be reconsidered on a difficult morning. That doesn't prove the practice has failed. It reveals how well the old response has been rehearsed. A habit is rarely replaced by one perfect act. It is replaced by a competing sequence practiced often enough to become available under pressure. Each time you notice the flare before completing the old behavior, even by half a second, the sequence has already changed. Each time you choose a generated action, you give the nervous system another experience of authorship. This is why the practice resembles learning an instrument more than adopting a belief. You can understand every principle of music and still need to train your hands. You can understand every principle of agency and still need to practice choosing while uncertainty is present. Knowledge reveals the movement, but repetition makes the movement yours. The observer will always remain available, and there will be times when observation is necessary, wise, and protective. The goal is not to become someone who never reflects, never checks, or never evaluates. The goal is to stop asking observation to perform the work that only action can perform. You observe to understand. You act to influence what happens next. You observe again after enough time has passed for the action to produce meaningful information. Then you adjust and continue. This is a more mature form of agency. It respects facts without becoming imprisoned by them, accepts uncertainty without becoming passive, and takes responsibility without pretending that everything is controllable. It gives reflection a place without allowing reflection to occupy the whole life. The quantum Zeno effect shows that, under specific physical conditions, repeated measurement can inhibit transition. Research into agency suggests that self-initiated action and its consequences are processed in distinctive ways within human experience. Neither field proves a philosophy of personal transformation, but together they offer two precise images worth carrying into daily life. One reminds us that endless measurement is not always neutral. The other reminds us that authorship is experienced through action. Frequency and authorship meet in the same ordinary instant. The urge appears, the fork becomes visible, and a choice is made between one more measurement and one generated act. That instant may be hidden inside a morning routine, an unanswered email, a difficult meeting, a financial decision, a health plan, or a project that has been waiting for permission. It may look insignificant from the outside, yet repeated across a life, it becomes the place where direction is formed. The number in the account may still be there tomorrow, the uncertain opportunity may still be unresolved, the body may still require care, and the project may still be incomplete. Transformation doesn't require pretending that these realities have vanished. It begins when they are no longer allowed to decide your next movement, before you have consciously entered the decision. Perhaps the change you need is smaller than a reinvention. Perhaps it is the hand pausing before the refresh, the breath taken before the clear sentence, or the 10 minutes of work completed before the mind is allowed to evaluate the future. Perhaps freedom begins when awareness stops being a camera pointed at your life and becomes a doorway through which you act. If this idea connected with something you are living through, comment below with the affirmation, "I choose the next action." You are also welcome to share a moment when you realized that more analysis was no longer helping, and one clear action finally moved something forward. Your experience may give someone else the language or courage they need to recognize the same choice point in their own life. If this video gave you a useful way to understand your patterns, please like it and subscribe for more thoughtful explorations of the mind, behavior, consciousness, and the inner shifts that shape daily life. Thank you for watching. The next time you feel the urge to measure what has not yet had time to change, pause for one breath and remember that your life is not only something to be understood, it is also something you are here to participate in creating.